Hi, everybody. Welcome to Community Conversations. I'm the facilitator, Courtney Shaw, and we're here every Thursday of fall term, except for Thanksgiving. Please do keep that in mind. We will not be here on Thanksgiving. But I did want to give a little shout out that next week, Alex Bream is going to be talking about the Pygmalion effect. We do have schedules in the back. So if you want to pick up one of our schedules to see the rest of the series, you can keep an eye on that. Or we update the website, and that also includes our recordings of previous events if you want to see what happened last week or 2 weeks ago, or last quarter or last year. You can go back and see lots of those events. So today I want to welcome Geoff Richie. And Geoff Richie is originally from Anchorage, Alaska. Geoff came to Longview in 2014 for a pre-doctoral internship at Northwest Psychological Resources, where he continues to practice today.
No, I'm at another clinic now.
Oh, okay.
Should have updated that.
Okay. Geoff teaches general psychology and lifespan psychology here at LCC, still live. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so I would like you all to welcome Geoff Richie.
Thanks, everybody. This quarter's theme for Community Conversations is on mythology. And I decided what better mythological figure to discuss than the devil himself. So who is this devil anyway, and why does it matter to psychology? Well, before we get into that, I want to have a little question session here. And we're going to question whether or not you, oh man, it's just doing that again. Yeah, it could be. Okay, so we're gonna ask some questions here. First of all, I'm gonna read a statement and put it on the screen. And if you agree with this statement, I want you to raise your hand. And then when the next statement comes up, if you agree with that, keep your hand up. Okay, first and foremost, one should strive to act with compassion and empathy toward all creatures in accordance with reason. Okay, there we go, good. The struggle for justice is an ongoing and necessary pursuit that should prevail over laws and institutions. Okay, most everybody agrees with that one. Okay, good. All right. One's body is inviolable, subject to one's own will alone. Okay. The freedoms of others should be respected, including the freedom to offend. To willfully and unjustly encroach upon the freedoms of another is to forego one's own. Okay. Not so much. It's the freedom to offend part. Now, if you say something offensive to a Nazi, are you okay? You're not okay. You don't want to offend the Nazis. Okay, I got you. Huh? You'll offend Nazis? Okay, I'm with you there. Okay, good. Do what now? Absolutely not. If I say something offensive to you, you are free to tell me that that was offensive and walk away. So, yeah. I mean, I like certain comedians and they can sometimes be a bit offensive. Beliefs should conform to one's best scientific understanding of the world. One should take care never to distort scientific facts to fit one's own beliefs. Yep, got mostly agreement there. Good. People are fallible. If one makes a mistake, one should do one's best to rectify it and resolve any harm that might have been caused. Strong agreement here. Good, good. Okay. These statements, each one of them is a guiding principle designed to inspire nobility in action and thought. The spirit of compassion, wisdom, and justice should always prevail over the written or spoken word. Okay, we have a fair amount of agreement. I'd say we got about 90% agreement with these statements, which is the 7 tenets of the Satanic Temple. founded by this man, Lucian Greaves. The Satanic Temple made headlines in 2017 when a private organization erected a statue of the 10 Commandments in front of the courthouse in Little Rock, Arkansas. The judge's ruling about that was that even though it was on public land, since it was privately funded, it was okay. So Lucian and his minions said, okay, we will privately fund a 9-foot statue of Baphomet to go right next to it. And the court battle began to ensue. And as soon as they got their filing in court, a group of Hindus said, we will privately fund a statue of Hanuman, the monkey god, to go right next to those. And then the Pastafarians said, we want to make a statue of the flying spaghetti monster to go right next to those. To this day, the case is still in litigation. It may make it up to the current Supreme Court, which might be bad news for old Lucian. Who's this? Huh? Who is this? That's Tim Curry. That's Tim Curry dressed in full makeup and costume for his role in the movie Legend, starring Tom Cruise and Mia Farrow. I'm sorry. And the character's name is Darkness. Much happier after he got on eHarmony, though. Yeah. Here the role reprised by Ryan Reynolds. Okay. The devil has many names. Let's talk about a few of them. Asmodeus, Baphomet, Beelzebub, Devil, Diabolos, Evil One, Father of Lies, Hasatan, Iblis, Lucifer, Mephistopheles, Old Scratch, Prince of Darkness, Prince of Lies, Satan. And these are just a few. And even these few, I don't have time to go over in detail. So we're going to talk about just a couple of them as we go forward. First of all, Baphomet. Baphomet, in the ancient world, in Europe, people venerated a horned god, very much resembling Pan from Greek mythology. He was said to be the consort of the mother goddess. And so they had a duality, a two-deity system where they venerated both the male god and the female goddess. The Holy Roman Empire attempted to convert everyone to Christianity. They changed the meanings of holidays and they redefined the people's deities, in particular the horned god, as the devil. He said, it's really Satan. Beelzebub, this is an interesting turn of events because in the ancient world, El was presumed to be the leading deity among many deities. El, of course, is where we get the term Elohim from. Even ancient Semitic people were not a monotheistic culture by any stretch of the imagination. They were more henotheistic, meaning that they recognized the existence of many gods, but there was only one that they thought was worthy of worship. Well, the same character, El, was venerated throughout the ancient world, through the Fertile Crescent, through Assyria, through Egypt, in those places. And some people called him Baal, or spelled Baal. That was another term. It means the same thing, Lord. In fact, the Philistines gave him a little suffix, Beelzebub, meaning Lord of all, to which the Israelites responded by naming him Beelzebub, the Lord of the Flies. It was a derogatory stab at what the Philistines believed. And finally, the name does appear in the Book of Kings as a deity worshipped by the Philistines and equated with Satan. So that's where that name comes from. Lucifer, Anybody tell me what Lucifer means? Light bringer. Yes, it's Latin for light bringer. Venus, otherwise known as the morning star, was also called Lucifer because it brought with it the light of day. Whoops, stay. The king of Babylon was also thought to bring the divine light of his rule to the people of Babylon, and so was also given the moniker of Lucifer or light bearer. The fallen angel storyline or narrative that we are used to comes from a single passage in Isaiah 12 through 14. "O Lucifer, how art thou fallen from heaven, son of the morning?" The surrounding passages make this much more clear. It appears that Isaiah is prophesying to the king of Babylon, probably Nebuchadnezzar II, but in respect to how his rule had failed because he was a wicked king. So that is how the Lucifer, who is the king of Babylon, fell from heaven. Mephistopheles. Dante's Inferno gave us our understanding of hell as a place of fire and torture, with increasing misery as one descends through all 9 layers. And the name that he gave the overlord of this place was Mephistopheles. Dante made the name up. It didn't exist before then, okay? Fictional. Marvel Comics created a character based on Dante's name for the devil, Mephisto. And in the Marvel Comics, Mephisto rules over a pocket plane named Hell and poses as the devil of human mythology in order to collect souls. In the upcoming multiverse saga, we keep expecting to see Mephisto make a big screen appearance, but we'll see. Satan, originally Hasatan, appearing first in the book of Job. Hasatan is the Hebrew for the accuser or the adversary, right? Now he's on God's staff, right? He's Yahweh's associate. And so what he does is he challenges Yahweh to see if Job will remain loyal if Yahweh were to withhold his blessings. And it's supposed to be an allegory about loyalty to God. But at no point is Hasatan mentioned as the adversary of God, but rather the adversary of man. Yahweh's acceptance of this bet seems a bit capricious to me. The serpent, the beast, 666 and 616. The serpent is never called by any other name in the book of Genesis. He's not referred to as Satan or Lucifer or Beelzebub or the beast or anything else. He's simply referred to as the serpent. The serpent is cursed by Yahweh to crawl on his bellies all the rest of his days. Yet Hasatan in the book of Job is quite chummy with Yahweh, and he's walking around. Doesn't appear to be cursed, doesn't appear to be crawling on his belly, appears to be a different character entirely. The beast in the book of Revelation is described as having 7 heads and 7 horns. Of course, Rome famously was built on 7 hills, and some scholars believe that the reference to the beast in Revelation is a reference to Rome and its persecution of the Christians before Rome converted to Christianity. Gematria is the practice of adding up letters. In those times, they didn't have numerals like we have today. We use Arabic numerals to express numbers today, but then they used letters. You're certainly familiar with Roman numerals. And so the practice was to take the letters in a name and then add up their values. As it turns out, Kaiser Nero adds up to 616. In early manuscripts, this is what we see. Kaiser Nero and the gematria adding up to 616. However, in later manuscripts, there's an extra N on his name, Kaiser Neron, and that sums up to 666. Of course, Nero was famous for burning Rome to the ground and then blaming the Christians for it. So it is thought by scholars that the reference to the number of the beast, 666, in the book of Revelation is a stab at Nero. As stated earlier, the Romans tried to convince ancient pagans or convert them in Europe to Christianity. Saturnalia, the old celebration in Rome that was held on the 21st of December, the solstice, was rebranded as Christmas. So you guys are celebrating something, but you don't really know what it is you're celebrating. What you're really celebrating is the birth of our Lord and Savior. Ostara, a spring festival held on the equinox, converted to Easter. Said at Saturnalia, Jesus was born, and that's what we're celebrating. And at Ostara, Jesus was raised from the dead, and that's what you're really celebrating. The horned god that was worshipped in ancient Europe, also called the wild man or the satyr, was rebranded as Satan. Say, oh, you guys are worshiping the wrong deity. You should worship this deity because that one is his enemy. The fear of divine punishment then becomes a tool for societal control. The church tells you that you have a need. You have a need to live on after your physical death in peace and harmony. And we have the answer for that. We have the solution to that problem. It's very much like marketing 101. Create a need, offer the solution. The control through fear persists even in modern religions. We'll get more on this in just a little bit. In modern times, there have been some non-punishment doctrines about the afterlife. There's three that I can think of. The first one is separationism. All right, some sects believe that there is no literal hell, but that separation from Christ is the punishment all in of its own. You can live on after death, but you don't get to hang out with Jesus. Annihilationism is another doctrine where there is no literal hell, and this was put forward by the Anglican Church in the late 1990s. They said there is no literal hell, it's just that non-believers will cease to exist, whereas the believers will live on through eternity. And then there's the principle of universal salvation. This comes from a Jesuit tradition, and there's a book about it called Dare We Hope All Men Be Saved. In this instance, there is a literal hell, but Jesus' sacrifice covers anyone whether they believe or not. The Satanic Panic. In the 1980s, pastors warned congregations that Satan was everywhere and he was trying to corrupt your children. Heavy metal and punk music was thought to contain hidden messages when played backward. TV shows, movies, and corporations like Disney were targeted. A few I can think of: He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. I have the power, says He-Man, and then the pastor says, no, he doesn't. The Smurfs were thought to be sent from the devil, right? Their enemy was a wizard. They practiced their own kind of magic. They were mythological beings. And of course, the Teletubbies were famously targeted by Jerry Falwell because one of them, Tinky Winky, had a triangle over his head. And Jerry said, well, that represents the pink triangle of the homosexual movement. The biggest, baddest of all, Dungeons and Dragons. If you played Dungeons and Dragons in the 80s, you may have been persecuted by religious folks. In fact, they went so far as to take their record albums of Iron Maiden and Black Sabbath and their books like the Player's Handbook for Dungeons and Dragons and have these huge burning parties. And I don't think I have to tell this room that the groups that burn books have never been on the right side of history. Purity culture. This is a phenomenon that we see in modern United States, particularly in evangelical fundamentalist churches. This is, again, it's the fear of upsetting God and receiving his divine punishment that captures people into purity culture. And that's drilled into them since they're very young. It's a patriarchal construct designed to control young women and to ensure the bloodline of men. Purity rings and marriage to God ceremonies. So some traditions have young women and sometimes young men get a purity ring that they wear on their wedding finger that reminds them to remain pure and to do what it is that God wants them to do. Recently, I was listening to a podcast, and the anecdote was about a man who was giving his daughter a purity ring. And what he said to her was, until you find a husband of your own, you are married to me and to God. A little creepy, right? The push for abstinence-only sex education, which if you haven't heard, the research is in on. Social scientists have studied this extensively, and places that require abstinence-only education have higher rates of teen pregnancy than places that teach comprehensive education. As a matter of fact, Texas, which subscribes to abstinence-only education, is #1 in the US for repeat teen pregnancies. Shaming of sexual behavior, immodest dress, and contact between the sexes. A sexual double standard is reinforced here, where people are taught that men and boys want only one thing, and that it's your job as a young lady to not tempt them. Don't laugh at their jokes or be too flirtatious. Make sure you wear clothes that cover you all the way up so that they're not tempted by the appearance of your flesh. You've heard this? So how does it relate to psychology? Well, there are a growing number of people who are seeking psychological help for what's being called religious trauma syndrome. There are several types of religious trauma that can occur, such as ritualistic abuse in the form of corporeal punishment. I remember an episode of Jerry Springer before it was the chair throwing show. I mean, I'm talking the Sally Jesse Raphael Donahue days, okay? And he had a group of parents on who were a part of a particular religious denomination where they really emphasized a certain psalm about rod sparing and child spoiling. And so they incorporated spankings into the daily routine. It was a bedtime thing. Brush your teeth, get your PJs on, daddy will be in to give you your spanking, and then you can say your prayers. If that's not ritualistic abuse, I don't know what is. Shaming of behaviors driven by genuine curiosity. Children are wonderful little scientists. They're so curious. They want to know answers. And when something doesn't make sense to them, they'll ask you about it. But in these circles, in purity culture, fundamentalist evangelical circles, children are told not to ask so many questions. Questioning your parents means that you're questioning God, and you don't want to upset God. Disowning of LGBTQ children. Let me just state this so that everybody knows. If someone disowns their child because they come out as gay or trans, that person is a terrible parent. Shunning in certain sects when someone violates the rules or steps away from their faith. Pentecostals are pretty good at this. When you no longer go to the church, they tell people, don't hang out with that guy. He's getting influenced by the world outside. The Mormons do it. They say they don't, but they do, right? They say, no, we always want to welcome people back. They'll send visiting home teachers to your home to try to convince you to come back to the church. But the friends you had in the Mormon congregation aren't going to go out of their way to hang out with you in that respect. The Jehovah's Witnesses are the worst of all. When somebody leaves the Jehovah's Witness church or disappoints their parents enough, they're completely disowned, completely shunned. They don't get to hang out with their friends. They don't get to go to their family home. In fact, when other Jehovah's Witnesses encounter them, they simply ignore them. They don't look at them. They don't speak to them. They act as if they don't even exist at all. So the Amish do it too. Although they do allow their kids to have that year of Raumspringen where they're like, okay, go check out society. And if it's for you, sayonara. And if not, you can come home. Shunning of people who divorce, remarry, or have extramarital affairs. I've heard stories from people on my couch in my office of having gone through a divorce, and the evangelical church that they were at asked them not to attend anymore. Now, how dare they actually do something like remarry, because then they're committing adultery. And of course, with extramarital affairs, that's the way it goes too. However, I will note that the extramarital affairs rule does not apply to the clergy in these churches. Messages of being defective from the get-go, original sin. You were born an abomination before the Lord, and it is only through his grace that you can be saved from that original sin. And if you wanted something and you prayed for it and it didn't happen, it's your fault because you didn't believe hard enough. Defective from the get-go. Sexual abuse by church leaders. This does not just exist in the Catholic Church. We have seen this in evangelical fundamentalist churches. We have seen this in the Mormon Church, who is in the middle of a huge litigation about it now. And there's probably other instances of it that don't come to mind right now, but we could probably find them if we search the newspaper databases. And even to this day, some of the people I work with who have left their religion have a feeling of guilt for normal activities. Things like going out on a Friday night and having a few drinks with some friends, or having extramarital sex, or the most evil, masturbation. Now, from a medical perspective, we know that masturbation is not only normal, natural, and healthy, but there are some certain health benefits from it. For men, ejaculation at least 3 times a week cuts the risk of prostate cancer by 50%. And for men and women both, regular orgasms help relax and lower blood pressure and raise immune function and generally give a person a sense of well-being. And also, years after leaving their religion, people have an existential dread of being tortured in hell forever. They may not believe in it anymore, but those old neural pathways are strong, and they'll wake up in the middle of the night in a start, sweating because they envisioned Dante's Inferno. The Conference on Religious Trauma was founded in 2020 by Dr. Marlene Winnell, and I'll read to you what she has to say about it. There is such a thing as religious trauma. Certain aspects of authoritarian religion cause harm that is physical, sexual, mental, and emotional. We are dedicated to making this clear. No longer is it a taboo subject. We intend to make evident the adverse ways in which religion can affect individuals, both psychologically, interacts with religion to create suffering that is properly called religious trauma. We want to disseminate this information to our culture in the fields of mental health, education, the justice system, and other areas of society. No longer will the damaging effects of religion be a widely held secret among survivors, and no longer will they be treated as invisible. And the first one was held, well, the first one was supposed to be held in Bellingham, but then COVID. So a couple years later, they actually held it in Portland, I believe. The Freedom from Religion Foundation is an organization founded in 1978 with over 30,000 members dedicating to keep church and state separate. They fight legal battles to end federal funding for Bible schools with no academic courses, for repairing and maintaining church facilities, and representing individuals who have been harmed by religion. They often work with ex-Mormons to get their names taken off the registry so that the Mormon church will stop sending people to their home. So that's a good resource. The Secular Therapy Project, to which I belong, was founded in 2012 by Dr. Darrell Ray. It connects non-religious or secular individuals who need mental health services with outstanding practitioners. Each practitioner undergoes a multi-layer vetting process. I had to eventually exchange emails with Dr. Darrell Ray himself after answering a bunch of questions about myself, including, did you go to a religious school? Are you a religious person, or what is your religious history? And what evidence-based practices do I use in my psychotherapy practice? Clients can trust the Secular Therapy Project to connect them with secular therapists who use evidence-based practices. So who is this devil anyway? Here's my thesis. The devil is an intentionally developed construct used to instill fear and elicit behavioral control. It causes harm to use the devil construct with children and with adults, and sometimes it even causes religious trauma. My recommendation as a practicing psychotherapist is to instill moral reasoning into children through induction, compassion, and leading by example. Questions? Induction is a technique that is taught in parenting classes, and we talk about it in the Psych 200 lifespan class, where your little kid has done something wrong, like they've stolen the rare new Pokemon card from a friend who just got it in a brand new pack. And so you sit them down and you have them try to view switch, and you say, well, let's imagine that it was you that got this rare Pokemon card in a brand new pack, and it was Johnny that stole it from you. How would you feel about that? So we try to induce the feeling of harm that was created so that the child can understand and develop empathy.
Okay, I'm going to check the microphone here. I think this is picking up. I want to make a quick connection for those who were here last week with Jennifer Hoagie's talk about mental health, and see sort of the connections we talked about with therapy and finding therapy that works for you. And I know that in my search for a therapist, one of the things that you see on the listings is, Christian counseling. It's like, okay, is that what's for me? LGBTQ affirming counseling is okay. Is that what's for me? And so looking at what the options are and finding the one that suits your needs best seems to be, part and parcel of what Geoff is doing here. Is that?
Oh yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool. Questions?
Does the age of the participant in induction therapy make a big difference in how long it takes you to convince them to be able to feel the feelings of the other offended party?
This is a parenting technique that we target to those who are about 3 to 5 years old. So Yeah, it's during those periods when they're learning about self-conscious emotions like shame, doubt, and pride.
The formative years, in other words, for
Yes,
that
very
type
much,
of behavior.
very much, yeah. And children don't do what you tell them to. Those of you with children will know that. Children do what you do. The famous little meme that came through my Facebook feed about a mother reading on the bus and her child was sitting next to her reading, and somebody asked, "How did you get the child to read?" "I modeled it." So modeling pro-social behavior and compassion and empathy are vastly important. Anyone else?
Well, my belief is that the devil was something people made up to excuse their own evil behavior. What do you think of that?
Well, I think perhaps that I agree that the devil was made up, but I think it was made up by the people who wanted to control behavior, and then later was co-opted by people who wanted to use it as an excuse for their behavior.
The devil made me do
The
it.
devil made me do it. You're thinking of Richard Ramirez here, right? Yeah. In the back.
Okay.
Clans and tribes and divine right of kings kind of thing.
So asking about the origin of the word devil also and the origin of the word Lord. Well, I don't know how we got to our English word Lord, but I do know that El and Baal were ancient terms that meant Lord. And then, of course, as we move into medieval Europe, you have the nobles who are the lords of the land, and they're serfs who live on their land. And so they are the landlords in that sense. Yes.
Pretty sure Lord comes from a Norse term meaning bread keeper or bread garter.
Bread garter. Okay, from the Norse term meaning bread keeper or bread garter, which you would be if you were the landlord with a bunch of serfs. And they're going to come to you to get the bread. It's true.
You're,
Okay.
one more. I'll always fill the gap if no
Yep.
one's got a question.
Mhm.
Discussing the idea of sort of being shunned from a society and everything. If we take this back further to, sort of old school Catholicism in history, you have excommunication, which still exists today. But
Mhm.
back then, if you were excommunicated from Catholic Europe, there's very little left. You are basically shunned from all society, and you can't perform many of the tasks that are necessary for you to live.
It's
a
kind of like
successful
somebody
life.
takes your driver's license and your social security card, and there's no way to get them back. And your bank account. So you can't go anywhere, you can't do anything, can't buy anything, can't hang out anywhere. Yeah.
But I also see, and here's my little bias and preface is that I grew up in a Catholic household. That how much one follows Catholic teachings varied tremendously, and we maybe don't have as firm a statement nowadays as to like, oh well, if you practice birth control, you're not a Catholic. Well, that takes 90%.
So many
of the
Catholics use
people
birth
out,
control.
right? So the idea of like cafeteria Catholicism, I'm going to take what I want out of it,
yeah.
and then.
As a matter of fact, even though the Catholic Church's stance on abortion is still a zero tolerance policy, when you poll people who identify as Catholic, the vast majority of them support a woman's right to choose.
Oh, we got one more question over here.
Okay, so me personally, I'm a very strong Christian, and so I personally believe that what am I trying to say here? I had it and now I lost it. Is that I think that the society has butchered the idea of Christianity because there's a lot of people, and I see it all the time, of people who kick out someone who's a child who's LGBTQ, or they do all these evil things and then they say it's just part of their Christianity. But I personally believe that that's not what Christianity is about. Christianity is about love, and I think we all have our sins, and that's just part of it. So loving each other no matter what. But it's very hard to see people do these evil things and then just say that that's
And justifying
Christianity.
it with
Yes, and
Christianity.
justify it as Christianity.
Yeah.
And I think that also is what has pulled people away from the church, is because they have these false accusations of what Christianity is, but it's just what the world has made it look like to me.
Yeah.
Personally.
Well, okay, so, and you can receive those messages if you attend Longview Presbyterian or the Longview United Methodist Church, or even St. Stephen's Episcopal Church, right? They kind of have the same philosophy that you're espousing there. However, I'm going to challenge you on that, because the Pentecostal church down the street is going to tell you that you're wrong in your interpretation of Christianity, and so is St. Stephen's, and so is this one and that one. The Exodus Church out here on Ocean Beach Highway claims that they are the true church and that their belief is correct. And the Mormons, of course, say all other religions that came before were abominations before the Lord, and that the Mormon church, and I know they like to be called the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but I'm 46 and I'm lazy. So the Mormon church, what was I talking about? Yeah, so they'll also say, yes, they are the true church, but given through divine revelation to Joseph Smith. So, and these are only a few denominations of Christianity. There are over 7,000 denominations of Christianity just in the United States alone. Which one's the right one? You tell me.
There is a wonderful.
Okay, one more.
One more.
Well, so that's why it's hard, because the Bible, in my opinion, is very hard to understand. So that's why there's so many denominations, is because each denomination has their own idea of what the Bible is saying. And so it's very hard because there's so many different opinions. It's just like you have to make up your mind of what you believe.
I have a trivia question for you.
Okay.
How many books are in the New Testament?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Any atheist can tell you it's 27. How about the Old Testament?
Not
33.
sure.
Yes, because they separate all the prophets out. Yeah, it's true.
I think you are also recognizing you have perhaps differing viewpoints here, but you also recognize that there is a broad diversity of faith and ways of interpreting that faith, and broad diversity in the ways people misuse faith. And both can exist at the same time, both the use and the misuse, I would say. But I am glad to see sort of a good conversation about this in a way that we are respectful of each other's beliefs and things like that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, here's the thing. What part are you reading? Are you reading the whole thing? Are you doing it from start to finish? Do you skip the begats? Right? The truth of it is that each one of the books in the Bible was written at a different time by a different author to a different audience. And the meanings that are in them are contextual to the history that they're trying to tell to that particular audience. And the Old Testament is full of violence and sex and adultery and whatnot. I mean, think about the story of David and Bathsheba. David, happily married king, has got his own consort, but he sees Bathsheba over there on the rooftop and he's like, want her too. So he sends her husband to the front line of the battle that's going on, hopefully for him to get killed so that he can then have Bathsheba as a consort too. And he's supposed to be the greatest king in the Old Testament. Explain that. We have instances of there is a rule in the Old Testament that says if a woman is raped and becomes pregnant, that she then must marry her rapist, and he must pay her father 50 shekels. How does that work?
Well, that's easy. Women aren't humans.
Oh, yes, of course. I forgot women aren't human. Of course. Right? So, and then, you know, in the abortion debate, I always like to bring up Deuteronomy chapter 5. If a man has suspected that his wife has had intercourse with someone else, which probably would happen if he was traveling and away and he came back to find her partially pregnant, then he could take her before the priest in the temple, and the priest would create a potion of brackish water and then feed it to the woman. And if she had been pure to her husband, nothing should happen. But if she hadn't been, then God will cause her womb to fall out and for her to be barren for the rest of her days. So God gave the first abortion.
I guess when I think about these topics, I always bring it back to the way that Jesus boiled it down when he was asked by the Pharisees what his philosophy was, or how do you summarize your teachings, Jesus? And it was two things. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Number one. Number two, love your neighbor as yourself. And so that's my lodestar of belief, and that each person can decide within their own mind and conscience and heart what their belief is after getting information from all these different sources that you mentioned, and that was interesting. But that's how I sum it up.
Fantastic. Yes, especially that second one, really emphasize that.
All right, I think we're going to last one right here.
In a world where so many people do not love themselves, that might be a little hard to come by. We have to help people love themselves before they can begin to reach out and understand others. Compassion comes that direction. The other thing I think is that you have indicated some various religious sects and some various religions, but it is not limited to that. And sometimes it is more obscure. So we need to pay attention to our own behavior and not just their behavior.
How we comport ourselves. One of the reasons why I went into psychotherapy to begin with is because I have so much compassion, and I genuinely want to help people who are struggling with psychological distress. And that's right. You can't talk about it with your mom and dad. You can't talk about it with your pastor, but you can come into my office and there will be no judgment. So, yes, a few representative examples because I only had 45 minutes, which we are just a little bit past. So thank you all for coming today. And hopefully I'll see you the next time I get tapped to come do one of these.
Thank you for coming. Please join us again next week.